Thank you so much, Rich. Hi, everybody. So nice to see you. Happy Thursday. I see some of you are ready to go. Mia has got her apron on. I know so many of you come back week after week, and I love seeing you guys every week to bake here with Michaels. And today we have a really great class. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Katie. For those of you I haven't met, welcome. Milagritas, I see you. Welcome back. But I'm a pastry chef, and I also teach baking classes here with Michaels, and it's always so fun to do that every Thursday. So come back and take more classes with us if you can, because it's so nice to have you guys here. And if you are baking along in person with me, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you're baking along, definitely if you're here live, be as, angsty in the chat as you need. Ask as many questions as you've got along the way, and I'll do my best to answer them. But today we're making pavlovas, which are so much fun. Has anyone made pavlova before? Feel free to throw it up. Let me know if you've made these before, if you've had good results, if you've never made them before. But to give you a brief history, pavlovas are named after Anna Pavlova, the Russian ballerina. So they are a very delicate, fancy, they're really not fancy, but a very delicate dessert, very airy, very light, and just a lovely, simple dessert that's very impressive and very nice for serving, whether it's like a very fancy occasion or just as an everyday sweet. They're just super fun. So we are going to make it was pretty bland though. Well, hopefully that won't be the problem today. We have some really good stuff. I have like Nutella, I've got raspberries. So we'll jazz it up and we'll talk about different fillings you can use and things like that to really amp up the flavor as well. But we are going to be making a few different parts today. We're going to make the egg white base. So we'll talk about meringues a little bit and some things to avoid if you're making meringue at home, just to make sure you have the most successful results. We'll fill with some whipped cream. I've got some fun stuff, some garnishes, and that's pretty much it. We're going to dive right in. So Rich, if you want to come down, I'll show you guys what I'm working with here. Oh, thanks so much. I have made them. Some came out great, others not so much. Well, that's fine. That's good. All right, so very simple ingredients here. You'll notice for meringue-based desserts like pavlova, you really only have like a few core ingredients going on. So this is a really nice dessert to make, even if you have like absolutely nothing in your fridge or your pantry. All you've got are eggs, which I know are expensive right now, but it only takes two. Just egg whites, sugar. I've got a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of salt, and some cornstarch, and that's pretty much the base. So essentially, with the egg whites are going to aerate our mixture. We're going to whip them up to make a really glossy, beautiful light meringue that's really nice and pipeable. Your egg whites can be at room temperature. That's a little bit easier to whip them up nicely and get that really great volume if they are at room temperature. So just let them stand out for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and they'll be good to go. Salt is going to balance the sweetness of our dessert, so that's always really important. If you're making desserts, always add a little bit of salt. If you ever notice that your dessert, somebody said maybe theirs tasted a little bland or a little flat, usually you're missing salt, no matter what dessert you're making. That's always kind of the culprit. Lemon juice is going to help stabilize our egg whites a little bit. If you don't have lemon juice, you can use something like cream of tartar or even vinegar. But essentially, that just sort of like stabilizes the bubbles as we whip our meringue and just makes it a more stable meringue as it bakes, keeps it from kind of deflating at all and things like that. Same goes with the cornstarch. That's going to kind of dry out our meringue a little bit. It's going to soak up some of that excess moisture from the egg whites and just kind of stabilize so you get that nice marshmallowy center, that nice crisp exterior. And then, of course, sugar, granulated sugar, or if you even have something like super fine sugar, will yield an even glossier meringue, which is really lovely. But that's going to sweeten our meringue, and it's also going to give us some stability as well. So that's the essential for our pavlovas. Then to kind of jazz it up, so I've got some piping tips. So if you do want to pipe these, you can really use any tip you like, whether it's a round tip, a star tip, open, closed star, whatever you prefer. Really, I have this sort of medium open star that's kind of like twirly whirly that I like. So I have one of those for the pavlova, and then I have one for the whipped cream that I'm going to put on the inside. Also, I have a little bit of gel food coloring, but this is totally optional, just as like a Valentine's Day theme going on. I thought like a little pink hue would be fun. But you can also color your meringue any color you want. You could also skip the coloring entirely, and we'll talk about different flavorings you could add. Or you can fold in something like melted chocolate to give it like a little chocolatey swirl, and that would be really fun too. I've got some Nutella because it's my husband's favorite, so I'm going to pop some of that in there since it's Valentine's Day and all. And then I do have some heart sprinkles, just for fun, just to kind of throw in. But we'll see. I also have like a basil plant over there, so we'll just have a little fun with it. But that's pretty much it. And then a stand mixer or a hand mixer, something to whip your egg whites. And that is all you need. So we're going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with our meringue. So before you use your mixer, no matter what you've been making with it, if it has any sort of fat, let's say I was making cookie dough in this mixer, and even if I cleaned it out really well with soap and water, just to avoid any issues when you're working with egg whites, it's always good to just wipe out your bowl and wipe down your whisk with a little bit of acid, whether that's lemon juice on a paper towel, a little vinegar on a paper towel, and just give it a swipe just to make sure any tiny bit of fat residue that may exist in your bowl will be gotten rid of, because any touch of fat will keep your egg whites from whipping up properly. So if you've ever tried to whip egg whites and they just like did not increase in volume and you're probably really frustrated, that seems to most of the time be the culprit, as well as a little egg yolk in the egg white can do that as well. And so when we took, yeah, somebody was just asking about alternative sugars. I would say be careful about how much you're adding. I wouldn't do it in the same quantity, but I would definitely look for sort of like a low sugar recipe for meringue and see how much they're adding. This is 2 egg whites, so just kind of compare apples to apples, just to be sure that it's not going to affect the texture at all. So I'm going to start these egg whites on about medium speed, and I'm just starting them on their own. And then as they sort of get to the frothy stage, we're going to start adding some of our other ingredients. So I'm going to let this go. So bear with me for about a minute. Just got to get to my mixer. Go get your mixer, Mia. Mia's amazing. She bakes along every week. And the reason we're not adding anything yet is because we don't want to weigh down our egg whites. So if I start adding my sugar and things like that too early, my egg whites won't really have that chance to build up their volume at all. It'll just kind of weigh them down. So we want them to get to the frothy stage before we start adding anything like sugar into the mix. All right, so we're looking for sort of a cappuccino vibe. All right. So when we think about stages of meringue, this is kind of our first stage. If it looks like a frothy cappuccino, that's kind of our frothy beginning. That's where we want to be before you start adding the sugar. And Rich was kind enough to just throw the handout in the chat. If anybody missed the recipe along the way, you will find it there. But so at this stage, once it's nice and frothy, our egg whites have sort of started building those air bubbles. This is when we can slowly start adding our sugar. And you do want to kind of rein it in really nice and slow. So I'm going to turn the speed to about a low to medium. And I'm just going to aim kind of in that spot between where the whisk and the bowl meet, just that little gap, just so it won't go flinging everywhere. And I'm just slowly kind of pouring it in, letting the egg whites absorb it as I go along. Same deal. If I took all my sugar and just sort of dumped it in, I would kind of weigh things down as well. So this is a half cup of sugar to 2 egg whites. I've got it all in there. And now we're going to let it go until we reach medium heat. So I'll show you what soft looks like, and then we'll look at medium as well, so you can see the difference. So we're sort of getting to soft peaks. So let's take a look at what soft peaks looks like. So if you're ever wondering, if you're looking at it, oh, these are very soft. I lied. Give me one more minute. Hold on. We're looking for sort of a classic dairy coon. Now, let's do like 10 more seconds.
Lisa's wondering, can you add other extract flavors?
Oh, thank you so much. Can you add other extract flavors? So yes, I would say you could really flavor your meringue any way you like. And I'm going to move this away so I can hear you as I whip it. Hold on one second. Yeah, in terms of meringues, so you can flavor your meringue, whether it's with something like vanilla extract or any other extract you like. So in any sort of citrus extract, like lemon extract, almond, even like rose water is kind of fun for Valentine's Day. Anything like that will work really well. You want to be careful how much you're adding. So a little bit goes a long way. You don't want to water down your meringue in any way. But you could also add something like anything that's dry, like spices or zest, or really anything like that will work well also. All right, we're getting there. So this is kind of soft peaks. We don't really have much peak going on. It's not really holding any sort of shape on the end of the whisk, but it's got like a little bit of lift to it. It's got a little bit of glossiness. Typically, it should even sort of like Dairy Queen over a little bit. You can see like I've got a little one happening, but not a lot. But that's sort of our soft peak. So if you look at a recipe and it's saying medium peak or stiff peak, we're going to go much more than that. So we're going to keep it going. And so cream of tartar is very similar to using lemon juice. It's an acid. So that's going to help stabilize your meringue. So if you've ever had a meringue that's, let's say it, just kind of doesn't hold its shape nicely in the oven, it wrinkles after it comes out of the oven, it kind of deflates down. If it weeps or anything like that after it's been sitting out, using an acid will kind of help stabilize it and keep it from happening. So that can be helpful for sure.
And did you add that, Katie, to your egg whites and sugar?
Yeah, so actually, right in the place of where I'm going to add the lemon juice, you could swap this for cream of tartar. I think I'm using, is it 1 teaspoon of lemon juice? I would actually downgrade that. If I was using cream of tartar, I would go for more of a half teaspoon because a lot really, a little bit goes a long way in terms of cream of tartar. So I wouldn't go too crazy. All right, so I've got this sort of softish peak. So this is the point where I'm going to start adding the rest of my ingredients. And then we're going to whip to sort of a medium or stiff peak. So my lemon juice is going to go right in. That's our acid. So that could be cream of tartar if you want to go for that half teaspoon. Or in an equal quantity, you could use something like vinegar. That would work also. I've got my cornstarch that's going to help sort of absorb excess moisture from my egg whites. So that'll stabilize my meringue a little bit. And then I've got a pinch of salt. So we can get those in, and we're going to whip this until it's nice and stiff. All right, and in the meantime, I'm going to get this ready. This happens pretty quick. Once the cornstarch is in, it kind of does the job pretty quickly. So you see if I look at it now, we've gained a lot more structure, right? In just a few seconds, you could see it's really holding a nice peak. This I would say is more of a medium. You could see how it's kind of hooking over. We're like in medium to stiff territory. I'm going to go a touch longer just to really give it that strength when I'm piping. But that's a really nice lift that we're getting there. And you can at this point also, like I've got a little bit of cornstarch on the side of my bowl. You just go ahead and scrape that down with the spatula. Make sure everything is really nicely combined. And if you add a spice like cinnamon, I would say same time we added the other items like the lemon juice and the cornstarch, but you could also add it at the end. You could do that also. I know it's, if you use pasteurized egg whites, it's totally safe. But at any point, I always feel pretty comfortable tasting the meringue. But that's up to you and personal preferences. But you can taste it and just make sure, that you've got enough cinnamon in there or anything that you like. And yes, you can over whip meringue. So when it comes to meringue, if I kept whipping it and I just kept going, at some point it's going to dry out to the point where it'll just sort of like over whip and become a little bit more grainy. This is a point you can kind of check out my bowl. I've got some nice peaks going on. I'm even going to go just a touch further just to make sure it's really nice and stiff. But if you kept it going, if you just sort of walked away and left it, At some point, it's going to start just overdoing it and getting grainy. So you just want to go until it's nice and stiff and then kind of stop there. I'm going to set this aside while I make my bag. So when we talk about prepping piping bags, I'm working with a plastic piping bag. You can use a fabric bag as well. You can see I just sort of folded down the top just to keep my edge nice and clean when my meringue goes in. And I'm just going to pop in my tip. So right into the bag. And just trim toward the top. I haven't really pushed it in yet, but I'm just kind of letting it peek through. It's clearing those little tines, but it's not going far down. And this is an Attica 885. This is like a random tip that I had, but it's about a 1/2 inch open star tip. But really any tip that you like will work well for this. Whether it's a star, a round, open star, closed star, you can really get creative with it for sure. And the
Katie,
lemon juice, yeah. Oh yeah, go
Jane,
ahead.
you were going to answer it.
Oh
She was
yeah.
just wondering if the lemon juice adds any flavor at all to the
You
meringue.
know, it's funny. I wouldn't say, like, if I were tasting the finished Pavlovas, I wouldn't say that I would notice the flavor. But I think, just subtly, it does kind of balance the sweetness just a touch. You definitely will not get lemon flavor. Like when you bite in, the sweetness of the meringue is kind of takes over. But you do get just like a subtle balance, I think, from the lemon juice. That's very nice. So just as a fun thing, I'm just going to paint my bag with a little bit of that gel color. And you could color the entire batch of meringue also if you want to, just like a drop or two. But this is kind of a fun way just to get a little bit of a swirl. And I'm just going to take a small paintbrush and try to not get this on my hands too much here. I'll go with this. And I'm just going to paint a line right towards the bottom. Maybe do like one more or two more. And when the meringue goes in the bag, it's going to kind of pick up that color a little bit and just give me like a little swirl of pink. Nothing too bright. You could go brighter if you want to. That lemon on eggy food is only to remove the eggy flavor. Yeah. I mean, acid will do that. Acid really does balance, but it does also balance the sweetness really nicely. And something like meringue, it's very sugar forward. So it is always nice to add some of those other flavorings, whether you go for an extract, a little bit of zest, just a touch of that lemon juice, anything that you like. But yeah, it probably does take the eggy flavor out of it also.
And Lauren is wondering if you
Yeah.
did want to flavor your meringue, what's the best way to flavor it?
Yeah, I would say like adding the flavoring toward the end, or even when we added the lemon juice and things like that. You can, I do taste mine, but no pressure about that. If you do use pasteurized egg whites, you can definitely, confidently taste your meringue. But as much or as little flavoring as you like, it could be at the end, it could be halfway through. Anyone that you prefer is good. Are chocolate chips fine? That's an interesting question. The only issue that's going to happen is you want to make sure your tip is large enough to let those chocolate chips go through. But yeah, you'll even see sometimes almost like a stracciatella kind of idea where you kind of fold in some melted chocolate and make little chips. That's kind of nice and subtle also, which is very nice. So today we're doing hearts. It's totally up to you what you prefer. This does make, I know the recipe says 5, but I'm not going to do super big ones, so I'm probably going to get like 6 or 7 out of it. So if you have a cookie cutter, you can use it as a guide. You could just go ahead and pipe freeform if you want to. But if it's easier, you could just go ahead and kind of give yourself a little bit of a guide. And if you do have a cookie cutter in the right shape, whether it's a heart or any other shape that you're doing, it's kind of easy to just use that and trace it as well. Pretend I'm going to get 7 because I think I have 7 that I made already. Now, of course, you want to flip your parchment over just to make sure there's no marker happening. But this way we kind of know where we're going, because sometimes when you're piping, you'll get like one big one little one along the way. So the egg and sugar, it's all still, yes, if your egg and sugar is still liquidy, keep going. Definitely keep going for sure. And other add-ins like coconut or minced pecans, when do you add the soft, medium, or stiff? So any other mix-ins that you're doing, especially mix-ins like nuts or mini chocolate chips or things like that, always fold them in at the very end. You never want to be whipping egg whites with any extra stuff in there. Yeah, and you could definitely print out a pattern, especially if you're doing like a bunch of little designs. You could definitely do that too. Do you fold in the flavor after you finish whipping the meringue? I would say whip it in because then you're going to get a nice even mix. So always whip in your flavoring. So I'm just going to go ahead and pipe the borders. And then you do want to also kind of fill in the centers a little bit. I'm not going too thick on my centers, but just a little bit. Same deal on the next one. And I think we're going to get that pink color in just a second. But I'm just doing the bottoms first, and then we're going to kind of build up the height a little bit with a border. You can see that pink starting to show through a little bit here. Beauty of Pavlova is you can really do anything you like. If you don't want to pipe them, you can also just scoop dollops. So here I'm going back and I'm kind of just building a little bit of height. So I'm not filling in the center because this is where I have extra room for my filling, but I am sort of creating a border for that filling to kind of stay in a little bit. So just a border around the top. Oh, will I make it? I'm so close. Oh, I'm so close. I think I'm going to be just shy. I can make it. Always stick your thumb in the tip. Oh, we eked it out. We did it. So you can see hearts and borders. So you see that little bit of a lift on that second layer. This way, once they bake up, you have that nice vessel to kind of fill them up with. And it's hard to see on this camera, but you can see a little bit of that swirl of the pink kind of running through. Pretty subtle, but you could go darker for sure. So these are going to bake at 250, which is a nice low temperature. If your oven runs hot for any reason, I would even lower that to 225 would be great. But you want to bake them really low and slow. You want them to feel nice and firm by the time they're ready. Usually that takes about an hour, depending on the size and the thickness. But definitely pick one up toward the end and just see, is it kind of holding nicely in your hand? Does it feel soft and squishy, or does it feel nice and firm on the edges? And then just leave them in the oven, turn the oven off, and let them sit and kind of cool down slowly for about 30 minutes or even up to an hour. And that'll kind of keep them from deflating a little bit and wrinkling up. It'll really keep them nice and stable that way. So that's our baking process. Can you add jam in the indent after they're baked? Oh yeah, definitely. Oh no, that's the whole point. We're definitely going to do that. For sure. We're going to add some jam. So let me show you the ones that I made earlier. And I did go darker on the pink earlier. You'd be like, oh, that's much more pink. But so you can see now they're nice and firm. I've got my border. Kind of pick them up and over. They're nice and solid. And you can do these overnight, definitely. So if you do them overnight, just let them cool completely at room temperature and just store them in an airtight container. And you can actually even do that like a week ahead if you want to. And they'll stay really nicely. And then once we add our fillings, they're going to kind of soften up in the middle and get really lovely. So if you don't have parchment, the only tricky thing I would say is I would line my tray with something just to keep it from sticking. Anything like a silpat or parchment would be good. If you don't have it, it's okay not to use it. But if you do have something, I would use it for sure, just to make sure you can kind of lift them off nice and easily. Oh, and no baked cheesecake filling. That sounds delicious. Yep. We used to line with brown paper. Yeah. Actually, wax paper is not great for baking with. I would say it's a pretty low temperature, so you're pretty safe. But I wouldn't bake with wax paper. I would go without if you have to. But if you have any sort of parchment or a silpat or anything like that, that would be great. All right. So I've got some fun stuff. So the beauty of pavlova is, depending on how you flavored your meringues, you can kind of fill them up and do any sort of flavors that you like. So I have some raspberries. I've got Nutella. I've got whipped cream. The whipped cream could also be ice cream. If you want to do like an ice cream pavlova, it would be delicious. And is there a substitute of confectioner's sugar? Well, confectioner's sugar, are you saying like, can you substitute the granulated for confectioner's? Because we actually I'm only using confectioner's sugar just as like a garnish, but you don't really need it. You could totally skip it if you want to. No pressure on that one. But I do have also, just as like a fun sauce. So if you do have any jam in your refrigerator, whether it's I had a little bit of raspberry jam or any sort of fruit jam, you could add a little bit of lemon juice or a little bit of water just to thin it out. And we're going to kind of use this as a sauce, just to kind of drizzle around our pavlova also. And that's just a fun little, just a little extra flair without really any extra effort, which is always a nice thing. Go ahead and start plating one of these up. So I've got my jam. So I'm gonna take this, and a good pastry chef trick. It's making you feel hungry. A good pastry chef trick is sometimes you can take your spoon and just kind of circle around your plate. That can always kind of look a little bit fancy. So it's kind of nice. You can also try to put it on a cake turntable and kind of swoosh it around. And then we are going to put our whipped cream in a piping bag, but you can definitely spoon it in as well if you want to. And I am using the same tip just for continuity, but you can definitely just use this spoon. That's good too. So I'm going to pop my whipped cream in to make this. So this is freshly whipped cream with just a little bit of confectioner's sugar to taste. You could also add a little bit of vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste, which some of you know that I love, a pinch of salt. And I just whipped this same idea to like those nice stiff peaks so it really holds its shape well. Get a spatula for that. Pop it into my bag. Get a drinking glass to help us a little bit. Whipped cream. And the beauty of Pavlova is you really can make these pretty far ahead. We sort of mentioned you can let them stand at room temperature until you're ready to fill. They really, I mean, these could stay for at least a couple of weeks at room temperature if you want them to, and nothing will happen, which is really lovely. Would a custard work as a filling? Yes. So that's the beauty of it. So once you make these, store them in an airtight, store them in an airtight container at room temperature. Up to a couple of weeks is great. The closer to serving you can make them, the better. They'll be even more fresh and delicious. But the beauty of your fillings is once these kind of sit, they're going to kind of harden up and firm up. And you're going to lose out on some of that marshmallowy texture in the center if you were to have them like freshly baked. So any sort of filling, whether it's a custard, a lemon curd, you could use ice cream, you could use whipped cream, you could use like a fruit compote that you would make. I'm going to put some Nutella in some of mine. But what's really nice is you can fill them up and then that moisture from your filling kind of softens up your meringue. So if you let that sit for a couple of minutes, then when people bite in, they get like this really lovely marshmallowy texture. So it's funny because this is a dessert that you sort of do want to let it get soggy, which of course for dessert is very unusual. But in this case, that's what we want. So that could be really helpful. All right, I'm going to choose this one because she's pretty. So I'm just going to glue her down with a little bit of the whipped cream just to kind of hold her in place. And then we can go ahead and finish her however we choose. So I'm going to take some of this Nutella. But again, this could be any filling that you like. And it is a fun way to kind of, you can let people do their own as preferred. I could put out a kind of like all different fillings and make like almost like a pavlova bar where you can kind of build your own pavlova. That would be really fun. You could add little flaky sea salt to that. You could add some chopped hazelnuts to that. I've got some fresh raspberries. I'll even have some of these just to kind of make them look a little bit more fancy. That's always nice with raspberries. You can kind of cut them down the center so it gives it like a little more something. And the fresh fruit really does balance the sweetness of the filling as well. And I'm just kind of keeping to the heart shape. And you can go ahead and, Timmy, you could drizzle with a little bit of Nutella if you want. But just a piping bag or melted chocolate can be really lovely. I'm just going to take a little bit of that. right in a small bag. We'll cut a nice small hole in that.
You're making everyone hungry, Katie.
I'm hungry too. I'm going to eat this after. I'm very excited about it. Yeah, just test it a little bit, make sure it's nice and thin. And then I feel like a little back and forth drizzle is always kind of a nice finish. You could just really gently back and forth. And you could prep a whole bunch of these on the baking sheet and then kind of finish them off. We could add a little bit of confectioner sugar just as like a final flourish. Oh, hold on. I have some mini chocolate chips. Kind of sprinkle some of those around. Yeah, that's nice. You could drizzle some more of your jam, but really like the more, if you think about meringue as like a very neutral base, so the more acidic, pop of flavor, like our fresh raspberries are going to give it that pop. The Nutella is going to give it like that really nice indulgent touch. That hazelnut, that touch of chocolate is really nice. But the more flavorful your fillings, the more flavorful your pavlova will be. So, diced mango, pineapple, anything that you love. This is a dessert that can really be served year-round using whatever seasonal produce that you have. So that's definitely really fun as well. So I'm going to do one more while we take any final questions. I know. See, Rich, I told you this was going to be a fast one. This is a quick and easy. I'll do one more here. And I'll actually show you in the picture that I posted, I also had some chocolate garnishes. So if you're interested in something like that, and this is kind of the same idea, I take the back of a spoon, a little dollop of Nutella, and just like a swoosh. That's always a fun one too. People are like, oh, it's so fancy, But you just did it with a spoon. Put that guy right on there. Do you put jam in with the original piping? Lovely, I'm holding my fork in. Did you put jam in with this guy? I did not, but let's put some in this one. Same idea. You could just kind of spoon in your jam. I could even put some fresh raspberries under my whipped cream just to kind of give it a little bit of that pop of fruity flavor. Top her off here. Do a little drizzle.
Can you remind our viewers what temperature did you put the meringue in for and for how long?
Yeah, so I put it at 250, but depending on your oven, I would say if your oven tends to run hot, even 225 is good. The lower, the better. These go really low and slow, so don't be afraid to use, a 200-degree oven, a 225-degree oven if you've got the time. The lower the temperature, the longer it will take. But if you're baking at 250 like I did, it took me about an hour for this size. If they're a little bit thicker, sometimes they take a little bit longer. But you really want them to be nice and firm. You want to be able to pick them up off of the baking sheet when they're done, and they should feel firm. Even if they're like a touch marshmallowy in the center, that's good too, especially if you're going to be serving them fresh. And then let them rest in that closed oven for about 30 minutes to an hour to really slowly let them come down in temperature. And that's going to keep them really nice and glossy and stable. If I just took them out right away and just immediately they hit the cold air, especially in the winter, your meringue, you're going to get all these little wrinkles. It's just going to sort of instantly shrink up. So that really nice low and slow resting period in the turned off oven can be really helpful for sure. Oh, I'm so glad you were afraid of meringue, but this looks so easy. It is easy peasy. It's so easy peasy, which is so fun. And it is a great idea for a dinner party for sure. It's a very good dinner party item.
Couple of questions about
Oh,
your egg
yes.
whites, Katie.
Yes.
One was, can you use egg whites that have been previously frozen, and can you
Yeah.
use powdered egg whites?
Yeah, so I actually I haven't done it with powdered egg whites. I don't see why not. Like a meringue powder should definitely work. I've definitely used meringue powders for meringue cookies and things like that, so no reason it wouldn't. But frozen egg whites, absolutely. And freezing egg whites is just the best way to store egg whites. They stay forever in your freezer. So just thaw them in your refrigerator overnight before you're going to use them, and then you can absolutely use frozen egg whites for sure. That's always good. Is the recipe shared? Yes, please see below. And you can definitely use fresh lemon. That would be even lovelier. So this is just a little melted chocolate, just for funsies. And if I do want to make a little chocolate decor, I just snipped a very small hole in the top of my bag. And let's say I want to make like little chocolate garnishes. I could pipe little chocolate hearts. And these are going to sit up nice and solid like little chocolate candies. You can use candy melts for this. Kind of use anything that you want. You can also make sort of like heart outlines like this. And you can use things like this as cupcake toppers. You could put them on your pavlova. I melted my chocolate on a double boiler, but you could also just use the microwave. I basically melted about 2/3 of the way and then stir the rest of the way. So that way it's like a quick temper. My chocolate's going to sit up nice and firm. And I'm just going to pop that in the freezer for about a minute. And then we'll use those to top off our pavlovas. You just looked on. These look delicious. I'm wondering, are the pink streaks in the pavlovas just food color? Yes. So they are food coloring. It's just a gel color, but you could use something like even better than a like a puree or a flavoring. You could even use like a dehydrated. If you ever get your dehydrated fruits like strawberries or raspberries, you can grind them up and fold those into your meringue as well, and that'll work really nicely too. But you could use something like a flavoring. We sort of talked about different extracts and things like that. Any sort of flavoring that you like. Meringue loves flavoring, so definitely feel free to go hard on that. And that would be fun for sure. All right, so we'll give our chocolate a couple seconds and then we'll be good to go. Just as a final flourish. Thanks. Mia, did you make them? How did yours come out?
We had two more quick questions, Katie. One is, what is the difference between a meringue and a pavlova?
Yeah.
And the other question is, you cook them in the oven for an hour, and do you let them rest in the oven for an hour, or do you let them
Yes.
rest outside the oven?
Yes, so in the oven. So about an hour in the oven at 250, and then turn off your oven and just let them rest inside. And that nice slow cool down process. That's always good for them, for sure. But yeah, make sure your oven is turned off at that point. You don't want to just keep them going. Oh, and what was the first question? There was, oh, meringue versus pavlova.
Right.
So yeah. So pavlova is made with meringue. Meringue is just whipped egg whites. So that could be for meringue cookies. It could be a meringue buttercream. Meringue is essentially just egg whites that have been whipped. So pavlova is made with meringue. You could see my chocolate set up kind of nicely. So I could just use these as like a little extra garnish. I just pop those into the freezer for a couple seconds.
Do you leave your oven door open when they're cooling?
No, so I keep mine closed. Just to avoid any excess like moisture in the air or anything like that. Yeah, and just let them kind of slowly cool down. Can you overbake them? If you do overbake them, you'll notice they'll darken in color. Let's say if I left them in the oven for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, they'll get really, really super crisp all the way through, which isn't the worst thing because your filling will still soften them up. So if you do overbake them, you can absolutely still use them. But they will sort of darken in color also. You'll notice like the white meringue will change to a little bit more of like a beige meringue, which again, not the worst thing in the world. But yes, they can be overbaked. Is it a dessert or I would definitely, I would say it's dessert. But, breakfast could be pancakes. So pancakes are really just cake. So technically, whatever you choose. If you did a really nice fresh fruit compote in these, you could do it for brunch. But yes, they are very much a dessert, I would say. More of a meringue question than Pavlova. How do you keep meringue from weeping? Yeah, so the cornstarch really does a good job of that. So if you have made meringue cookies before and things like that, and you found, or even a meringue pie topping, and you notice that maybe it's weeping over time, the cornstarch helps soak up that excess moisture. So it's going to keep it from doing that. So definitely always add cornstarch to your meringue in a small quantity, and that's really going to help kind of get rid of that weeping problem. All right. I'm going to dig into one of these, but otherwise, that is it. That was our whole thing. The beauty of Pavlovas, they're so fast and easy. I'll clean off my spoon. Oh, which one should I eat? I'll go for this one. And you'll notice if they sit a little bit longer, like mine is pretty crisp on the edges here, but if they sit a little bit, they're going to absorb that moisture and soften up really nicely. And you just get this like really yummy bite of like crisp meringue, soft filling, delicious fruits. Just beautiful and yummy. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I hope to see you next week. We have another class next week. Happy Valentine's Day. It's this weekend. Have so much fun. I did not leave the oven door open. I kept it closed. Bigger computer. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you so much.